and welcome to your last video lesson of Algebra 1. We do have a little bit more to do, but it's all going to be done in class. So this is your last video notes. The learning targets today: choosing an appropriate method to solve a given quadratic and explain why it's appropriate, and solve a quadratic using any method. All right, so in this lesson, we're going to review all 5 methods for solving a quadratic and look at when it is most appropriate and when least appropriate to use each method. Okay, for most problems, there is more than one method that will work. As long as your work matches the method you've chosen, you should be fine. What I mean by that is, don't say, oh, the quadratic formula because it always works, and then go on and factor it. Okay, make your work match what you've chosen. So let's review the methods. First one is graphing. This method should really only be used when I ask you to use it. It is a long process, and many times the solutions do not cross nice points. There's rarely a time you will choose graphing. Actually, there shouldn't be a time that you choose graphing. Okay. Second method is square roots. That was lesson 4. This method should be used when b equals 0. This method can't be used if b does not equal 0. Right? So if b is any other number other than 0, you cannot use square roots. If you try, it's going to be wrong. All right. The third method is completing the square. I'll just put complete the square. This method is best used when b is even and relatively large. Also, it should only be used when a is 1. So this method should not be used when b is odd or when a is something other than 1. Those kind of turn me away from completing the square, and I want to go a different route. You can do it with b being odd or when a is not 1. It's just not as nice. So those are the first 3. We'll go ahead and scroll down here. Last 2. Factoring is the next one. This method should be used, and it's going to sound really silly here. This method should only be used when you are able to find the factors. Therefore, if you can't find the factors, choose another method. Okay? And I'll talk about that one on the back. Last one is the one we spent a lot of time on here recently, the quadratic formula. This method should be used whenever a is not 1, unless there's a small time when if a is not 1 and b equals 0. If b equals 0, remember, you always use square roots. It's just an easy method to follow. This method should also be used whenever the other methods don't work. So if nothing else works, go here. All right. There is never a time when this method can't be used when we're talking about quadratics. However, it is one of the most time-consuming, and it has the biggest chance for mistakes, in my opinion. So I would try to find another method if possible. This is kind of my last resort method. All right. So let's do a few practice. I'm not going to solve them all the way through. I'm just going to talk about which method to choose and then why. All right. If you say on the why it's easier, it will be wrong. I'm going to tell you that right now. So number 1, I see that a is 5. Personally, I'm going straight to quadratic formula. I know I just said it's kind of my last resort, but I see a is 5 and b is -8. That's my reasoning right there. A is not 1. And B is not 0. Okay, that's why I'm choosing quadratic formula. This would be a very difficult one to factor. It'd be a very difficult one to complete the square. Can't use square roots, and graphing we just don't choose. Other methods to use, you might be able to factor it, but I would probably say on this one, you almost have to use quadratic formula. Okay. Second one, I personally would choose factoring. I said I was going to talk about the why. I can find the factors. I know what the factors are. I can tell you right now that that's x plus 7 and x minus 2. So here's what the process should be in your head. You look at the problem, you think, oh, that could be a factoring problem. Don't just automatically think, oh, it's factoring. Find what they are. 7 and negative 2 are the two numbers that multiply to negative 14 and add to 5. I was able to factor it. Therefore, I then say, okay, I'm going to factor this one. So my reasoning is I was able to find the factors. Now, let's say you're not a good factorer and you weren't able to find the factors. You're like, I still don't really understand factoring that well. I'm not even going to try it. Okay, that's fine. The other method that would work would be the quadratic formula. Square roots would not work. Okay, completing a square, you could do it. It's just going to be disgusting because B is odd. So with what I showed you on the front page, I would say factoring or quadratic formula on number 2. Scroll down to 3 and 4. And let's see here. Right away on number 3, I see square roots. Why? That's a great reason right there. B equals 0. Other methods you could use, if you're crazy, use the quadratic formula. If you remember the special cases with factoring, you could actually do factoring here. But I would say square roots is probably my easiest on this problem. Okay. Number 4. Yeah, this is a complete the square. Why? B is even and large, relatively large, right? And A equals 1. Now, could you find the factors of 407 that add negative 407 that add to negative 26? Maybe. If you're really good at factoring, potentially you could factor. I don't know if it is factorable or not, but potentially. Also quadratic formula. But the one that this is meant to follow is completing the square. Okay, can't use square roots here. Number 5, negative 72 and negative 6. I'm going to try factoring. I want you to try factoring too. See if you can find the two factors that multiply to negative 72 and add to negative 6. And I get x minus 12, x plus 6. Yep, it does factor. So I'm going to say my method here is factoring. Why? I found the factors. If I started trying to find the factors and couldn't find it, what would I do? I'd move on to another method, probably the quadratic formula. Also, you could probably complete the square here. B is even, right? It's not necessarily large, but it's even, that's good. And A is 1. So that's a method as well. Last one, method chosen here. A lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, that's a tough one. You got a fraction. It's disgusting. It's actually not that bad. It's a square roots problem. Why? Because B equals 0. What else could you use? As always, you could use the quadratic formula. You probably noticed on all 6 of these, that that's an option. Not the best option for most of them, but it is an option. It's pretty much it for the other methods on that one. Well, it's been fun. That's it. Last lesson done.